Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Meet the Author session, where you, all of you, and I will be in conversation with José Eduardo Agualusa, who is the writer of dozens of novels, poetry, as well as a children's collection. José is from Angola, and he's currently in Mozambique. He has been in Portugal. He's also been in Brazil. He has been writing for a very long time.
Very long time.
Since the 1980s. It's quite a big volume of work. I think the book that really brought you to the fore here in Kenya, which we're talking about with Ndegwa, is A General Theory of Oblivion, which is about a Portuguese woman. Her name is Ludo, and she essentially locks herself up in a house on the eve of Angola's independence. The majority of your books seem to be set in Angola, and also in other places. And we see her looking at how Angola is changing through revolution, through the Civil War, up until modernity, capitalism, and a lot of cast of characters who sort of come into a house, and we explore this world with her. My favorite book, and which also isn't Ndegwa's favorite book, is The Society of Reluctant Dreamers, which, like many of his other books, José's books, is really centered around dreams and how dreams are sort of brought to life. And you have a character who literally dreams, I guess the woman of his dreams actually comes to life, and he explores what dream making is with her. And then there's another book which I've also really loved called The Book of Chameleons, which is about a person who essentially, is a person of albinism. His name is Felix. And he sells to people who come to his home new pasts. They want their stories rewritten. But it's also about reimagining Angola and what it was like after the Civil War, post-independence, post-colonialism. So welcome, José. It's your first time in Nairobi.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think I want to start just by reading a short passage from the Society of Reluctant Dreamers, because I found that dreams are really the core of much of your writing. They weave through much of your writing. And this is a section where the main character, Daniel, is talking to the woman of his dreams, Moira. And it's about a machine that is being used to sort of make dreams into a picture like almost film quality, which I thought was really beautiful. I got up, I poured myself some coffee. My hands were trembling. I sat down. And the machine? That machine for filming dreams? Amazing. You've got to see it for yourself. I'm working with them, with Helio's team. For me, it's an artistic project. It's going to keep me busy for many months, maybe years. She told me, her eyes shining, waving the metal blue of her nails before my dazzled eyes, that she spent the previous days painting watercolors. She painted animals, plants, all kinds of objects, atmospheric phenomena, rivers, waves, geographic accidents. The watercolors were then digitized and collected up in a huge image bank. First, Helio studies the brain activity of sleeping volunteers. The volunteers are woken at very short intervals. Each time, they recount what they have been dreaming. The neuroscientist and his assistants look for patterns that might be associated with different images. The data is inputted into a computer. Finally reversing this process, it's possible to produce short films from the cerebral activity of somebody dreaming. I still don't believe it. Moira laughed. My disbelief seemed to please her. Up until now, they have been using photos taken from the internet. What came out of this weren't exactly films, but successions of disconnected images with watercolors and a decent computer. And it's possible to achieve a certain fluidity, some kind of movement. They're still very imperfect, but they are films. I'll believe it when I see it. So I wanted to start off with, where do you see the place of dreams in your writing, or how do you use dream making in your writing?
Okay. Well, good morning. I will try to speak in English, but because my English is so bad, Ndegwa here will help me if I can't find the right words. The extraordinary thing for me is Ndegwa learns Portuguese with the Brazilian soap operas. So show some respect to Brazilian soap operas. Thank you. You know, about dreaming, I decided to write this book because dreaming is part of my process as a writer for a long, long time. For a long time. For instance, this book, The Book of Chameleons, that in Portuguese have a very different name. The main character comes to me in a dream, okay? And he says, I sell pasts to rich people in Angola. And after that, I wake up and I remember that. And I wrote first a short story. I was in Berlin at that time with the grant. And I wrote a short story about an Angolan in a Brazilian bar that sells pasts to rich people in Angola. And this short story did well. People like it. And I start to think that I can do another thing with that. And so I wrote novel. But it's very common. Sometimes I dream it with characters, sometimes with the title of the book, sometimes with all the plot. So it dreams from it real help. I remember a French poet, when he goes to sleep, he put cartaz, a paper in his door, in his room door, saying "Silence, poet working," and it's the same with me. So yes, dreaming for me it's very important, and that's why I decided to write this book. Also because at that time in Angola, we were living a process with young people, young Angolans, that was a book club at first, and but they were democratic fighters, and they did a lot of demonstrations, and they were arrested, and this event was very important in Angola to change things. And so they are dreamers. So I decided to write a book about the importance of dream together. Okay. And after I published the book, the president fall. So it works.
Yeah, and I mean, and yeah, we will talk about that, the political situation at least, and your own optimism around that. But I guess going back to how dreams are part of your influence, and talking about the French letter, but who are your other influences in your writing? I think there was one where you talked about Bourget in one of your interviews, but just who are your contemporary and also past influences in your writing?
Well, we are in Macondo Festival, so Garcia Marquez, yes, of course, it's one of my first great passions as a reader. And all the Latin Americans, Borges also. This book, the Book of Chameleons, in Portuguese, the title is the Past Sellers, some things like that. But I remember very well that the publisher house didn't like the title, the Portuguese, and my translator also said to me, no, it doesn't work in English. So we try. I remember that very well that we reviewed the book, all the translation very fast together, but we spend all a week talking about the title, and now we have so many titles that we can write a book of titles for writers.
That would be good.
That have no. And I remember that we understand that the publishers, they want something more tropical, with palm trees or something. And we start with palm trees, and then we end with the chameleons. But I never believe so much in this title, And the first review, I think, was Guardian or something in England, and it was a very nice one. But the last sentence was about the title, and it says, this is a very bad title, nothing to do with the Portuguese title, because the book, the narrator of the book is a gecko, and the gecko is not a chameleon. And he starts talking about geckos and chameleons, and the name of the guy was Lizard. And so I called the publisher saying, look, that's a very authorized opinion, because it's a lizard, you know, talking about chameleons, and it's not a chameleon. Yes, it's a gecko. But yes, okay. And then some years after that, I published a book in Portugal. The title in Portugal is The Book of Chameleons.
It's very different.
Yes, and now I want to know how Danielle translate this title in English.
It's interesting because I actually thought it worked because of how chameleons change color depending on the environment.
Yeah,
and you have
true. Yes,
then you have all these characters who are sort of trying to change who they are based on their past. So it still works.
Yes, I understand. I understand the idea. Yes. Yeah.
And I guess going
But
to that,
I remember what I'm saying. The narrator, the gecko, is Borges.
yes.
Is Borges. So when he remembers his past life, is the real Borges life. I mean, it's taken by the Borges biography. You know.
Yeah.
So it's a revenge against Borges because, you know, I really love Borges, but personally, Borges was a very racist person until the end. He died very racist. And so it's a kind of sweet revenge.
I like that. And you're thinking about that depending on the audiences, because this is now a book in translation, and of course you're writing across different places. It's Angola, it's, you know, whether in Portugal, whether in Brazil. How do different people react to your writing? Yeah. Whether it's generational or because of language or because of historic experience, what has been the most striking reactions for you?
Well, people react very diverse, yes. For instance, to have a gecko as a narrator, in Europe, everybody asked me that. And I remember one day I was in a tour in France, and somebody asked, why you choose a gecko? And there was a Senegalese at the audience, and he says, why not in Africa? There's a lot of geckos. And in tradition stories, all the animals speak. And you know, the only character in the book that is a true character is the gecko. Because I was traveling once in Malaysia and in the jungle. And I was in a small, well, I was ecologist at that time, and it's an ecologist meeting there. And I was with a Spanish in the same place and by night. And we wake up with somebody laughing. And it's a woman laughing, you know, and we thought there was somebody trying to frighten her. And we put lights on, and there was nobody. And then I saw a gecko really laughing. So the gecko is true. The gecko is true. And after that, there was a biologist that gave me the pictures of that gecko, saying in Angola, in the south of Angola, it exists that gecko that laugh. And after that, I don't know, maybe it's 5 years ago, they found in Angola a new species of gecko, and they name it as me, because so I'm a
Especially named.
And a lot of people approach me talking about geckos, you know. In Angola also there's a lady, an old lady from Benguela, it's an old town in Angola, that tell me, look, I really love your book, because at my place in Benguela, there's a gecko that sing to me, and nobody believe. And I told her, look, they don't sing to everybody. I'm waiting, they sing to me. One day maybe they sing to me. So yes, that's it. And there's a people that give me a lot of geckos, you know, statues. I have a gecko collector now.
Well, that is interesting. And I guess going to that, we should actually read a bit from the book of the gecko, which I'm going to call it. And then, and then we'll talk a bit about form, because I found this letter really interesting and about how you're able to move across fiction, poetry, nonfiction in your own writing. So, my dear friend, I do hope this letter finds you in excellent health. I realize that what I'm writing you isn't really a letter, but an email. No one writes letters anymore these days. But to tell you the truth, I do miss those days when people communicated by exchanging letters, real letters on good paper, to which you might add a drop of perfume or attach dried flowers, colored feathers, or a lock of hair. I feel a flicker of nostalgia for those days when the postman used to come and bring letters to our house, and we were glad, surprised to see that what we'd received, what we'd opened and read, and at the care we took when we replied, choosing each word, weighing it up, and assessing its light, feeling its fragrance, because we knew that every word would later be weighed up, studied, smelled, tasted, and that some might even escape the maelstrom of time to be reread many years later. I can't stand the rude informality of emails. I always feel horror, physical horror, metaphysical and moral horror when I see that. Hi, how can we possibly take seriously anyone who addresses us like that? Those European travelers who spent the 19th century traveling across the backwoods of Africa always used to refer jokingly to the elaborate greetings exchanged by native guides when during the course of a long journey they happened to cross paths with a friend or relative in some favorably shady spot. The white man would wait impatiently until after several long minutes of laughter, interjections, and clapping had passed, he finally interrupted the guide. So what did the main say? And how they seen Livingstone or not? So how do you decide on your form of writing between, if you have a story, you're inspired to write something, between poetry, epistolary like this, nonfiction, or children's writing?
Well, I don't know. I like the books when you start writing, the books that you think you are not able to write, you know? So I try different things, you know. Now I'm writing a biography. I never did it.
Of who?
Yeah, no, it's an Angolan. It's a very curious person. It's an Angolan politician, but an Angolan politician that lose. It's a loser, not but he's a very good loser, you know. And he's a survivor. He survived twice air crashes during the Angola War, and another other thing. So and for me it's interesting because it's to trying to tell the story, the history of Angola, not centered in Luanda, in the capital of Angola, but centered in my own place, in Wambu regions. So it's another Angolan story. It's very different for the official story, I can say.
Oh, that's nice. 'Cause, I mean, Luanda has been like the epicenter of much of your writing.
Yeah.
Do you want to say more about that?
Well, Luanda is the capital, and it's a very interesting town, yes, because it's full of energy and interesting people, interesting characters. So it's for a writer, it's very interesting because we just go out of home and we talk to somebody in the streets, and you have an incredible story, you know. You just read the newspapers also and the short notice, and you will find incredible stories. So it's a privilege as a writer to live in a place as Luanda. But that's true that outside Luanda also there are good stories, yes.
And another thing that I find interesting is how many of your characters often want to forget, or like in the general theory of oblivion, she locks herself up and then she talks about how, there's a line from the book, I'm trying to remember, but it's about this forgetting. Yeah. And then in the book of Chameleons, everyone wants to forget the past that they have, but in writing, you end up remembering them. Tell me about that.
Yeah. You know, there's this discussion in Angola as in Mozambique about the way to deal with the past. We had a very difficult past, a very long civil war, a dictatorship, a terrible dictatorship. and now we are trying kind of democracy. And there's this long discussion how to deal with this, with the past, with violence. And my best friend is a writer from Mozambique, Macondo. He will be here also, yes. not personally, yes. I know, because he's in France. Yes. And he defends, Macondo defends to forget. Okay? And I defend the opposite. I defend we must talk about, we must fazer o luto juntos.
Fight together.
Não, fazer
o luto.
Luto. Quando morre alguém, como é que se diz que você faz o luto dessa morte? To grieve?
To grieve.
To grieve together. So, yes, to grieve together, to cry together, you know? And then maybe you can lead with this past. But so there's these two positions in Angola and in Mozambique, and I think everywhere. What is the best way? You forget all things, or we must remember that things all. So it's about this discussion, yes.
And I guess because much of your writing is about the past, but what kind of future do you imagine for Angola or any other place that you've written about?
No, I'm not. I'm like the Miss. You know the Miss. This Miss. Os concursos de Misses. Yeah. Não. Os concursos de beleza, the beauty. They all say I want peace for the world. You know.
Yes.
And that's what I want. And democracy and all of that things. Yes. And well, that's because we have not this until now in Angola. We are fighting for this. So these basic things, that education for everybody and free education, and special that, because the most important thing is to people have books to read everywhere. So I really fight for instance, for public libraries, and yes, and peace and democracy.
So in terms of how that's emerging, and you've been part of that narrative making in terms of being able to bring out Angola's history, but there's also a new crop of writers who are emerging, of course, whether it's of different generations or ages. What have you learned through your writing journey that you would want to impart to them?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I start writing because I want to understand myself, you know, and I want to understand my country, and I want to understand my place inside my country. And to write, it helps me, really. That's why I wrote some historic novels, because to understand this complex present, you really must understand the past, you know? So I help, my books can help people to understand Angola a little bit, you know, and to understand people, to understand humanity. I mean, I also, why the evilness, you know, why people do bad things. That's, we understand easy why people do good things, but why people do bad things. So trying to understand the evilness, it's part of my, read a lot. That's what I say with young people comes to me, and with new books or trying to write a book. I say all the same, you must read a lot, you must read all kind of things and writers, but try to find your writers. You know, we can't say the best writers because for each people it's different, you know. But you must find your writers, and so read a lot.
Did you manage to find your own writers when you were throughout your writing journey? Given that you're also writing in a very different language, how was that for you?
Oh yes, okay. Yes, we are. I think when you write, you start writing, and first book, a second book, and then another one. Yes, you are not there, but you are approaching there. You know, yes.
Okay. I guess because this is also everyone meeting you, I wonder if people have questions that they would...
We can't see nobody.
We can't see anything. Because I would love to open it up to everyone else as well, to be able to ask questions or any clarifications.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk and for the amazing books. I had a question based off of what you said, that you began writing to understand yourself, to learn more about yourself. Has your reason for writing changed from when you began till now, or have you had more reasons, other reasons that have come up for why you write? Thank you.
Well, no, the same reasons, because, for instance, this question of evilness, why people do bad things, I still don't understand. So I need to write about. And even the question of to understand Angola, all this process, I understand better now, that's true, much better. But there's a lot of things that I don't know, I'm discovering. And I'm discovering through the books.
Hi, thank you so much for that talk. My question is really about narrative, and I think coming from the Anglophone world, I get to interact with the Lusophone world through your eyes and through many Lusophone writers. And so my question really is around how, as a writer and an author, you are able to help readers like me from the Anglophone world and another world be able to really get a glimpse of the world that you come from, and also in many ways, I guess, not really have that big disconnect that I feel still exists from Anglophone Africa or Lusophone Africa as well.
In this book, The General Theory of Oblivion, there's this woman that is alone in his apartment, totally alone, because he locked herself in that place. And during a lot of years, she survived because she had a lot of books, okay? And each book is a kind of a window to another place, to other people. She travels on the books. And that's what books are, you know? Books can, the most important thing is, when you read a book, you can become other person during some times. And this exercise of being other, it's really important to approach people, you know? So, yeah, I think the books did this. I really believe the books did this. The books put people more próximos.
Each other.
Yes.
Hello. So my question is, when you started out writing, or when you write now, do you ever find yourself feeling worried that whatever message you're trying to pass across, people really won't understand it fully? And how do you deal with that and not get in your head when you're writing?
You know, I really believe that you need to be a little irresponsible when you write, you know, because you can't think how the people will react to your book, okay? If you are all time thinking on that, you can't write. Especially in a country as Angola, and I wrote a lot of books during the dictatorships, and I had some problems with the government at that time. But and really, if before writing the book, I was thinking on it. I didn't write the book. So you must write the book because it's important for you. Because it's important for you. You really need to write this book. and not asking yourself how will be this. People will like it, don't like it, doesn't import. This is not important. The most important thing is it's important for you. You enjoy the process. If you enjoy the process, and I really enjoy the process until now, it's the same for me than in the beginning, you know? It's the same passion. I write to discover things. I writing because I want to know how it ends, my story, you know? So for me, it's exactly the same. I'm afraid when I start to write because I think I can't. It's too hard for me. It's too difficult. But few and few, you are discovering things, and all this history comes, make a sense, you know, start making a sense, and that is incredible. That it's for me. It's really as in the beginning. It's same thing. It's a miracle there, happening there in front of you. And okay, if nobody likes, okay, you enjoy the process. It's important.
Yes. Do you think writers in Angola today, they have complete freedom to write whatever they want, or there are still some topics which are off limits or taboo? And secondly, who is the Angolan politician your next book will be about?
Sorry, the last question is? You want to know? Abel Chivukuvuku. He had a story about this country also. I must, because I'm writing that now, I remember that he was here, and I must find people that was with him that time, but that's another question. The first question was? Yes. You know, there's a good thing and a bad thing. The politics now in Angola doesn't read books, doesn't read fiction. It's a bad thing, but it's a good thing because you can write whatever you want. Because they don't read, they don't know, they don't care. They don't care, you know? So you can, now, these days, you can write a novel, whatever you want. But maybe if you write in a newspaper, you have some problems, you know? If you have, because they read the newspapers. They don't read books, but they read the newspapers. And I remember very well once I presented a book of an Angolan writer, a very good book. And during the other president time, And the book is a terrible attack to this president, a terrible attack. And the writer, he works to the government. And it's full of people of the government there, okay? And there's a guy with me that will be present book with me. And it's a Portuguese guy, and he was very frightened. He says, but this book is terrible against the president. And now we must say something about the book, and this is all these ministers and the people of the government. And they say, yeah, you can say what you want, because these people doesn't read. The writer know that these people doesn't read, so we can say whatever, no problem. No problem. They don't read books.
So I'm going to be selfish and ask something on my behalf. I want to tie in 2 points. The first one where you said you started writing to discover yourself. The second one, not caring about what people will think when you write. I write. I look at my writing and I can tell what my mood was when I was writing when I'm looking back at it. And I don't like some of my moods. So how do you get over that if you do?
I never had this problem. Some writers have the white page, the blank page, you know. I'm a great poetry reader. I read poetry all days. And poetry saves me all days, every day. And every day when I start when I sit to write, before that I read poetry. And it helps me a lot to write. And when the best page when you are writing is when you forget it. When you forget it all, you know. I remember there's a a Portuguese young writer, Gonçalo Tavares, the best one now, is born in Angola. He is quite a genius. He's a very special guy. Yeah. And he told me a story. Once he was in a hotel, writing in a hotel, and there was a enchente, água cano que rompeu a água, veio uma enchente, Yes, you know. What's the name when there's a problem in the water and the water comes?
Flowing.
Huh? A flood. A flood. There's a flood. There was a flood, and he was writing and doesn't notice that, you know. Just when you have the water like that, you notice there was a flood. And I believe it. I believe him. Nobody believes. But I believe him. I really believe. Because when you are writing real strong, you forget everything around you. You know? You forget it. The best page you write, you don't know how you did it. You don't know.
Great. Thank you, José, for being here with us today. My question is a bit in line with what has just been asked. Wanted to hear more about what you read, whether you read books from other countries, from other languages, and how that affects your writing process. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I read very different kind of writers and from different regions, but I try to read in English, but it's very hard to me. So, I will, usually I await that book is disponible in Portuguese, so I can read in Portuguese. I can read in French. In French, yes, I can read all a book. In English, for me, it's real. Hard to read, but of course you learn with each. Sometimes with writers that come very far away from you, and you doesn't expect it, you know, and you are surprised by that. But you know, people is people, everywhere, is people, with all the same problems, all the same feelings, is people. So sometimes you read a book from a guy from Indonesia. You know, and you feel, well, this guy is me, you know. I could write this book, and it's could be surprising because it's so far away, it's so distant for you, but yes, it's people.
Hello, I heard you say that you were an ecologist before you started writing. I was wondering if you could maybe engage us as to how your thought process was before you started writing, and at that point that you decided you're going to switch from ecology, if you're not doing it anymore, to how you decided this is the time I'm starting to write.
Well, I'm ecologist in political terms, you know. I was an activist. But I studied agriculture, you know. I studied agriculture, and then I started writing in newspapers. I started writing first in a newspaper called Africa. I started writing on ecology, and then I started writing about books, and then I became journalist, cultural journalist, during a lot of time, over a long time. How I become a writer? It's just I don't know. It's just I know how I start my first book is a historical novel, okay, and I found a collection of newspapers, of Angolan newspapers from 19th century, and that was an incredible time in Angola, and you know, the majority of people doesn't know this. Until the end of 19th century, the links with Angola have strong links with Brazil than with Portugal. The process is directly Angola and Brazil. And there was this petit bourgeoisie in Angola that have a lot of power in political terms, in cultural terms, in economic terms also. And so the majority of these newspapers in Angola at 19th centuries were directed owned and by black Angolans, you know. And when you start reading that, you feel in all the world, you know. It's fast. You are in another world, you know. You are there in 19th century. So I start reading these newspapers, and there's a lot. I found a big collection of these newspapers. I count more than 90 titles, 90 different newspapers at that time. And so I had all the characters. I had the way people talk at that time. So it's this first novel comes very fast inside me. It grew up very fast, and so it's because of that. Because I found this newspaper, I found my history, and for me it was very important to discover all that world that I didn't know. And in Angola at that time, now it's very different, because there was a lot of books that were published about this time and this particular Luanda time, so Luanda society. So it's very different. But at that time, nobody knew that. Very few people. And you start to discover all of that. It's incredible. It's amazing.
Hola. You've only mentioned male writers. You've been talking about Garcia, but I've not heard you talk of a female writer. So I was wondering whether you read female writers, and do you think if it's important to be diverse in terms of gender?
Yes, of course. You know, now, these days, everywhere, there are much more women reading books than men. And that's why also that's now a new generation of young female writers. And of course, for me, it's very interesting to try to read these new writings that are arriving. In Angola, there are very few women writing in old times, but now it's full of people, of female writers. But there's a poet, for me it's very, very important. I read her all days, an Angolan poetry, Ana Paula Tavares. And well, it's a pity she's not translated to English. Well, I think she has something translated, but very few things, because you lost it a lot. So I will try to read all these writers. Yes.
We can take one more question and then wrap up.
Hi, Jose. When you won the Literary Award in 2019, they called your work the emergence of the emancipated reader. So I was just wondering, when you write, do you have an intended audience in mind? Do you write for fellow Angolans or for people from the outside looking in? Thank you.
As I told you, I write first for myself, you know? And then, yes, sometimes I think in a special person. It depends the book, you know. Sometimes you think, oh, I really want these people this guy could read my book, you know. But yes, it depends of the book. But usually, when I'm writing for myself, you know, for discovering things.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Very insightful.
And we did it.